Fontaine has brought us quite the showstoppers recently, but time has come for us to rejoice as we reconnect with our resident desert expert, CYNO. CYNO'S rerun is coming up within the next few days, and it has been quite a drastic couple of months since we last saw him. Fontaine has been out for a while now, and Furina has taken up center stage. Today we will be exploring how CYNO'S shifted since patch 3.5 and whether he's fit to take part in Furina's grand play. This is Taiso Games and welcome to the channel. With time and the introduction of new units with long-lasting abilities and buffs, CYNO'S major downsides have been somewhat mitigated. Now let us take a small step back. For those who may not be aware, CYNO is a burst-reliant character somewhat like Itto and Xiao. He has an unusually long ult that requires him to be on field for a whopping 18 seconds. For many players, this is seen as a large downside, not only because he takes up a lot of time on field, but also because there weren't many units with long enough buffs to comfortably support him. A unit that required so much on-field time and specific supports in a game where most teams adopted a more quick swap playstyle, it really amplified the community's distaste for CYNO. Shortly after CYNO'S initial release, we got Nahida, which put a small bandage on his long ult uptime as she has long-lasting Dender applications with her elemental skill and decent EM buffs that benefit him. It was only after her release when we started to see where CYNO would begin to fit in the meta and what kind of units he truly needed to shine. After his first rerun, we got Baizhu in patch 3.6, which really felt like another missing puzzle piece in CYNO'S teams. Baizhu's ultimate provided CYNO with 14 seconds of sustain, additional interruption resistance, and a decent amount of Dender application. At this point, CYNO was primarily known to be a great carry for Hyperboom teams. CYNO'S damage, while impressive at times, was greatly outshined by Keqing. While she may not have done as much damage as CYNO, she compensated by being extremely flexible in almost all of her team comps in her playstyle. And now we have Furina, a character with decent Hydra application with her elemental skill, which has a 30-second duration and a straight up damage buff with her elemental burst with 18 seconds of uptime. Furina really is the Hydra unit CYNO was looking for as she further opens up his Quick Bloom teams. Quick Bloom was a team that was primarily held together by some holy water and a little jellyfish, that being Barbara and Kokomi. You see, these characters were just capable of sustaining slow Hydra application for long periods of time. That's why Furina is so strong here. She does both and does both very well. While her skill may be a bit inconsistent and random at times, its slow application is what makes Quick Bloom work so well. That and her huge damage buff feels nice. I mean, who wouldn't want, 75% damage bonus. Furina alone allows you to drop characters like Yelan and Xingqiu in favor for more damage, and we've seen Furina already shift the meta and bring forgotten characters into the light like Noelle and Jean, for instance. With her ability to single-handedly create new teams and bring up old units, it's no surprise that she works so well with CYNO. Not to mention her kit synergizes perfectly with him as she has such long-lasting abilities, making CYNO'S long field time no longer feel like something you had to overcome. On top of that, she also buffs your other support's damage while also having impressive personal damage. Overall, she's the last puzzle piece that was missing from CYNO'S teams. And now with these three units, we have CYNO'S strongest team, a team consistent of Furina, Nahida, and Baizhu. Now this brings up a noticeable downside. To perform at his most optimal level, CYNO wants these 5-star support, not just any 5-star supports, some of the best ones in the game. This wouldn't be much of a downside if he had other supports that had the same level of comfort that these three provide. And that's not to say that he can't use other characters at all. He's frequently run with Kuki, Fischl, Yelan, Xingqiu. His budget teams simply don't feel as good nor really compare damage wise. While yes, what feels good is definitely subjective, we can still objectively look at the numbers and see the difference. His own numbers, while decent, he still wants these units and a solid amount of investment to really pump out the most damage. Now let me be clear, when played right feels incredible. He feels really rewarding. He's an incredibly strong carry. He just requires certain units. You really wouldn't want to run CYNO without Nahida or Baizhu, for instance. It's important to consider CYNO'S value in the whole scheme of things. He's an Electro main DPS that has quite a few constraints where currently his best damage is tied to Dender specific teams. Like all, if not most hyper carries in the game, he has incredible vertical investment. So if you like him and you want to build a team just for him and push him far, then it's definitely worth it. But if you'd much rather have an Electro DPS with more flexibility and can be used as a support as well in other teams, there's Raiden Shogun. And while no, Raiden and CYNO run in different teams and have different playstyles, if you're lacking the proper supports and need a unit that can reliably take on different roles, she is a more valuable unit for your account. If you're lacking the proper supports and need a unit that can reliably take on different roles, I consider her a more valuable unit. When we're discussing the character's value, I think it's important to see where these characters can be used. And even though they're not the same kind of unit, they're not running the same teams, it's important to consider what you need and what could push you further. If you're having trouble clearing things, I don't think CYNO'S a good option. He's a character that needs more investment and more units to properly get the most out of him. When you look at a character like Raiden, even though she's not in the same teams, as I've said, she can be played in so many different teams and so many different setups that she is a more valuable unit. That's not to say CYNO'S bad, it's just realizing where different characters' strengths lie. And it's important to note that we know at some point during the 4.x series, we should be receiving Clorend. She could become the best Electro hyper carry, but we won't know until she comes out. All this to say that it's important to consider what you have, what you need, and what you enjoy. If you're someone who doesn't like the playstyle of a burst dependent DPS, then I suggest against pulling him. Outside of Abyss and bosses, Cyno won't really be on field much considering that his damage is tied to his burst, and by the time you use it, everything will probably be dead. When thinking about the future for Cyno and of characters that could possibly add more to his value, there is a possibility for further growth, but I find that somewhat unlikely. His current best team seems pretty perfect, and I can't really see much room for improvement, aside from constellations for himself or for his supports. Looking at Cyno's kit, it seems pretty likely that Hoyo intentionally made him to be strong for Dendro teams, and making him stronger over the patches. It could be coincidental, but you can't really deny how suspicious it is that he keeps getting run right before or after his best supports. It's the third time now, coincidence seems unlikely. Unless we get some crazy power creeping in the future with new Dendro supports, I can't really see anything changing. Or there could be a new overload meta in Natlan with the Pyro Archon, who knows. I can't really see Cyno getting much stronger. If anything, he might become more flexible, which I wouldn't be mad at, that's for sure. Whether or not Cyno's a unit you should pull for is really dependent on your own playstyle and needs. He isn't an absurdly broken unit that shreds through enemies with the press of a button, but he's not as bad as the community made him out to be back during his initial release. He's just a character that's needed a bit of time to grow into a unit worthy of praise. Now, with his best supports out in full force, it's definitely foolish to disregard his strengths. I don't think he's a character you should blindly pull for without thinking it through. I would not recommend him if you don't have the units to properly make him shine. If you're newer to the game, I can't in good faith suggest him when there are so many other units that could give your account more value. It's only after you have his supports and have the proper investment and you want a hyper carry, then you should consider going for him. He's the kind of unit you pull when you've grown your roster and have a better understanding of the game. And I feel like this goes without saying, but if you like Cyno because of the way he looks or the way he plays, regardless of his strengths, then go for it. I'm not going to tell you not to pull for him for those reasons. Now that we've made it to the end, I'd just like to thank everyone for taking the time to watch this video. This is the first on the channel with hopefully much more to come. If you enjoy these kinds of discussions and would like to see more, consider liking and subscribing. This has been Taiso Games. Thank you for watching.